your organization is probably supporting a lot of toxic behavior and they know about it. The problem is that they choose to do nothing about it because it feels like too much effort. It feels like too much effort to start to challenge the toxic behaviors within the organization because maybe the person who's being toxic is an income generator. Maybe the toxic person sits in HR. Maybe the toxic person is the CEO and the HR team just don't have the pull to change much, to push the boundaries. So, what do you do in that situation? And for me, this is why lifestyle architecture is so important because it's really about the navigation. We cannot always avoid toxicity, although in an ideal world we would love to. In an ideal world, there would be toxic organizations anyway. But the reality of it is that toxic people lead to toxic behaviors. And people are lazy about good governance, but good governance doesn't also stop or prevent toxic behaviors. And learning to navigate within these systems, learning to navigate whilst having to face toxicity makes it makes it a lot more important to be very focused on how do I live my life? How is my life in general aligned with my values? And how am I creating the space I need to be able to face the challenges that there are within my organization? Because being able to protect yourself, recognize what those challenges are, and realistically ask yourself the question, is this a fight I can win? Can I other things that I can change? And a lot of the times the reality is within toxic organizations, within toxic behaviors, or you have good organizations with toxic behaviors that only impact you as an individual. The question is, what can I do anything about it? And because most of the time we can't do anything about it besides finding a new job, how do you cope in those moments? How do you cope when you have to do this day after day after day? I can't do too many of the days, otherwise you might stop watching. And this is where it becomes really important because in a lot of the two things that I've seen with both executive clients and institutional clients is one thing. Toxic behaviors and overworking go hand in hand. Toxic behaviors and overworking go hand in hand. Because usually women who are at the brunt of toxic behaviors force themselves to work harder in order to be validated, in order to show that they do not deserve this behavior, they work harder, which inevitably leads to the burnout, leads to the distress, leads to all of the challenges that you're trying to avoid in order you're trying to avoid them, but the person who is being toxic does not value you fundamentally. And that's the vicious cycle that anyone in a toxic environment faces. It's the overworking to be validated by somebody who does not value them. And the construction of the life outside of that cannot just be about survival, but has to be about rejuvenation. It has to be about rest. It has to be about recharge. It has to be about what can I do and where can I use my strength, resources, and all these other things to push myself to be able to cope with the challenge of a toxic environment. I recently saw a thread and it was talking about the relationships between men and women. That men automatically tend to say no, even if later on they say yes. And the example that was given was wife says, I'm going to try the black toothpaste. Man says, doesn't think it's a great idea. Wife goes out and buys black toothpaste. husband, I think he didn't even say wife and husband, he said wife and man. Man says, no, man uses said toothpaste and says it's great. Even though we might not be talking about all these different things, there is an emotional load to always having to resist. There is an emotional load in always having to negotiate, in always having to concur, not to concur, to concede. And this is part of a very essential pillar of lifestyle architecture, pun intended, is building something that still recharges you in the face of all of this resistance. Because it's crucial in order for us to be able to survive, yes, thrive, yes, within these toxic environments and toxic organizations, but above and beyond that, to reclaim and redefine our joy outside of work.